One of the issues with poverty and underdevelopment is this long-term world systemic pattern where the core areas of the world have been essentially draining resources away from those peripheral areas. You need to understand that as sort of a backdrop to underdevelopment and poverty in places like Africa, for instance. I mean, in Africa, you have a situation where not only were resources drained out of the continent by colonialism, but in fact, human beings were shipped across the ocean to another colonial part of this imperial system, and there was a tremendous social disorganization that happened. So you've got a long-term pattern that contributes to what's going on today. Now, that doesn't mean that poverty is only explained by these kinds of processes. Sometimes there are things that happen in particular locales that contributed to poverty.
For example, technological production is low in countries that are poor. That is to say, countries don't make use of the most productive technology. Agrarian societies are far less productive than industrial societies. So if you don't have industrial technology, you'll produce much less and have a far greater population that is poor.
In most cases, the most underdeveloped countries are located in the southern hemisphere.
The Industrial Revolution and expansive imperialism happened from Western Europe, from northern countries, and they then settled temperate zones with settlers, like North America. And so we have the expansion of Europe into the north. And so it's for these historic reasons that Europe developed capitalism, industrialism, and imperialism. And we're still living off the benefits of that. And we've been able to maintain our kind of level of technological superiority.
Some cultures are eager to embrace technological change. Others are more traditional and place greater emphasis on non-material, on kinship, on tradition, on local community, maybe on a religious orientation that might slow or even largely discourage technological innovation.
The wealthier nations have a tremendous advantage in education and technology. And so almost all of the R&D, the research and development of the world, I believe it's 96% of the R&D in the world comes from the northern countries. They just dominate innovation and the ability to transform technological breakthroughs into manufacturing processes.
So there's a level of technological dependence. So that's one mechanism whereby we see this inequality maintained. Other mechanisms, well, one that's related, I suppose, to technological dependency is the whole brain drain phenomena, where the most highly skilled people from places like India or China or Korea tend to gravitate to the higher wage areas of the world, the core areas of the world. So if you're a doctor or a technical person who's gotten trained, at least initially, in a place like India, you may end up in Silicon Valley. So there's a drain of the highly skilled people from that part of the world to the more advanced parts of the world.
There also appears to be a correlation between standard of living and the role of women.
In societies in which women are assigned a role that is largely domestic, these are societies in which women have very little access to birth control, they have very little access to education, they have very little access to productive work outside of the home. That means that not only is the society less productive because half its population has restricted opportunities to be productive, but also the birth rate is going to be very high, which means that the economy has to support an ever-increasing number of people. If population is increasing at 3 or even 4% per year, even a robust economy that is growing at 3% a year is having no overall effect at raising living standards.
In some cases, the issue is not simply one of overpopulation, but of distribution.
The problem is usually in who has access to what resources, to what food resources, to what land resources, and very frequently you see hunger situations being associated not so much with population growth, but with political problems or badly planned policies.
In other words, in societies that are very unequal, even if you produce more, the question is, where does this end up? How much is ending up in the hands of those who are at the bottom in terms of the stratification hierarchy? How we distribute what we produce obviously has an important factor on affecting poverty in the world.